Captain Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him. The numbers didn't make sense. His ship, the UES Vanguard, had been traveling through space for 3 months when they picked up something strange. The energy readings were coming from the Kepler 442 system, but they were unlike anything he had ever seen. "Captain, you need to look at this," said Dr. Lisa Carter. She was the ship's expert on alien artifacts and ancient civilizations. Her voice was excited but also worried. "These energy patterns are older than anything we've found before." Much older. Jake walked over to her station. The Vanguard was a deep space exploration ship with a crew of 40 people. They were supposed to be patrolling the outer edges of human space, looking for threats or new worlds to colonize. But this discovery was different. "How old are we talking about?" Jake asked. Lisa pointed to her calculations. "At least 10,000 years. Maybe more. The energy signature is completely unknown. It's not matching any alien technology in our databases." Communications Officer Ryan Torres looked up from his console. "Captain, Admiral Bennett has been trying to reach us. He wants us to continue our patrol route and report back to base." Jake thought for a moment. Admiral Paul Bennett was his superior, and disobeying orders could end his career. But this discovery might be the most important find in human history. "Tell the Admiral we're investigating an unknown energy source. We'll report back when we know more." Ryan nodded and sent the message. Jake turned back to Lisa. "How long to reach the source?" 6 hours at maximum speed, she replied. "Do it." "All crew prepare for investigation protocol." The Vanguard changed course and headed toward the mysterious energy readings. As they got closer, the entire crew became excited. Whatever was out there was massive and definitely artificial. When they arrived at the coordinates, everyone on the bridge went silent. Floating in empty space between 2 dead planets was a huge crystal structure. It was at least 2 miles long and shaped like a perfect diamond. Its surface was covered with patterns that seemed to move and change as they watched. "My God," whispered Dr. Carter. "It's beautiful." The crystal was translucent, and light seemed to pulse through it in waves of blue and gold. The patterns on its surface were geometric, but they felt alive somehow. Lines and circles shifted across the crystal's face like a slow, hypnotic dance. "Ryan, try scanning it," Jake ordered. Ryan activated the ship's sensors and directed them at the crystal. The moment the scan beam touched the artifact, everything changed. The crystal suddenly blazed with light so bright that the ship's screens automatically dimmed to protect the crew's eyes. "Captain, it's responding to our scans," Ryan shouted over the humming sound that had filled the bridge. The light from the crystal reached out like arms and wrapped around the Vanguard. Jake felt a strange tingling sensation, as if electricity was running through his body. The last thing he remembered was a voice speaking directly into his mind, saying words in a language he had never heard but somehow understood. When Jake woke up, he was lying on the bridge floor. His crew was scattered around him, all slowly getting to their feet. The humming sound was gone, but the crystal was still there, now glowing with a steady, peaceful light. "Is everyone okay?" Jake called out. His crew members nodded and checked their stations. Everything seemed to be working normally, but something was different. Standing in the center of the bridge was a figure made of pure light. The being was roughly human-shaped, but taller and more graceful. Its body seemed to be composed of the same energy that flowed through the crystal. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "I am Keeper Zeph 1, the being said. "I have been waiting for you for a very long time." Dr. Carter stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "What are you? Where do you come from?" "I am a guardian," Zeph 1 replied. "I was created by your ancestors to protect the knowledge of your true heritage. You are descendants of a great human empire that once ruled the stars." Jake felt his heart racing. "That's impossible. Humans only reached space a few hundred years ago. We've never had an empire." The Guardian's form flickered slightly as if it was sad. "Your people once controlled thousands of worlds across this galaxy. You possessed technology that made you the most powerful species in known space. But something terrible happened. A war came that nearly destroyed everything." Lisa pulled out her recorder and started taking notes. "What kind of war? Who were you fighting?" "Entities called the Void Singers," Zeph 1 explained. "They are beings of pure hunger that consume entire worlds. They feed on matter and energy, but most of all they feed on consciousness itself. They turn civilizations into food." The bridge fell silent. The idea of creatures that ate thoughts and minds was terrifying. The war lasted for centuries, the Guardian continued. Your ancestors fought bravely, but the Void Singers were too powerful. In the end, humanity made a terrible choice. They destroyed their own civilization to prevent the Singers from spreading to other galaxies. Ryan checked his instruments nervously. If they destroyed everything, how are we here? Earth was chosen as a refuge world, Zeph-1 said. Your ancestors erased all traces of advanced technology and allowed humanity to start over as a primitive species. It was the only way to hide from the Singers and give your race a chance to survive. Jake tried to process this information. So we're not really from Earth? Earth is one of humanity's oldest colonies, but not your first home. Your species spread across the galaxy millions of years ago. You are the inheritors of an ancient legacy. Dr. Carter looked up from her notes. Why are you telling us this now? The Guardian's light dimmed with what seemed like worry. Because the Void Singers have returned. They are moving through this galaxy again, consuming entire star systems. They are searching for the Guardian sites and the technology hidden within them. What technology? Jake asked. Weapons and knowledge that can fight the Singers. But only humans can use them. Your consciousness, your emotions, your ability to hope and love and sacrifice for others. These are things the Singers cannot understand or overcome. The crystal structure outside the ship pulsed brighter. You must find the other Guardians before the Singers do. You must awaken humanity's true power. The fate of not just your species, but all conscious life in this galaxy depends on what you do next. Jake looked at his crew. They were scared but determined. How many other Guardians are there? Dozens scattered across human space. But time is running short. The Singers are already destroying worlds on the outer rim. Soon they will reach the core systems. The captain made his decision. Then we'd better get started. Commander Alex Stone gripped the controls of his fighter ship as he approached the Tau Ceti system. Behind him flew 5 other pilots from the Vanguard, all volunteers for this dangerous mission. Guardian Zeph-1 had given them coordinates for another Guardian site, but something felt wrong. Control, this is Stone, Alex spoke into his radio. We're approaching the target system, but I'm not seeing any planets on sensors. Back on the Vanguard, Captain Morrison checked the star charts. That's impossible, Alex. Tau Ceti should have 3 inhabited worlds and 2 space stations. Alex flew closer to where the planets should have been. What he found made his blood run cold. There was nothing there. Not empty space, literally nothing. The areas where planets once existed were holes in reality itself, dark spots that seemed to swallow light. Captain, you need to see this, Alex transmitted back to the ship. He activated his camera and sent the feed to the Vanguard. Dr. Carter watched the images on her screen and felt sick. Those aren't just destroyed planets. They've been completely removed from existence. The dark areas pulsed with a strange energy that made Alex's instruments go crazy. As he watched, wisps of black smoke seemed to drift away from the holes and dissolve into space. Get back here now, Captain Morrison ordered. Whatever did this might still be around. Alex and his pilots turned around and flew back to the Vanguard as fast as their ships could go. When they landed in the ship's hangar, Alex was shaking. He had seen combat before, but nothing like this. Dr. Carter immediately began analyzing the readings Alex had collected. What she discovered was even worse than they had feared. The energy patterns match what Zeph-1 told us about the Void Singers. But this is more than just destruction. They've somehow consumed the entire mass of those planets. Guardian Zeph-1 appeared on the bridge again, his light form flickering with what seemed like anger. The Singers are not merely destructive. They harvest worlds like farmers harvest crops. Every particle of matter they consume makes them stronger and more intelligent. Lieutenant Katie Walsh, who operated the ship's science equipment, looked up from her console. How is that possible? Where does all that matter go? They convert it into a form of energy that feeds their collective mind, the Guardian explained. Each world they devour adds to their knowledge and power. They learn from the civilizations they destroy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, General Pete Hammond was having the worst meeting of his career. He sat in a conference room with the leaders of the United Earth Council, trying to convince them that humanity faced extinction. General, what you're suggesting is ridiculous, said Council President Helen Brooks. She was a politician who had never served in the military and didn't trust soldiers. You want us to believe that humans once ruled the galaxy? That we're being hunted by space monsters? General Hammond played the recordings Captain Morrison had sent back to Earth. The images of the consumed planets and Guardian Zeph-1's testimony filled the room's screens. "Ma'am, this is real. We have confirmation from multiple sources." President Brooks shook her head. "This could all be faked. Computer graphics are very advanced these days. I think Captain Morrison has been in space too long and is having hallucinations." "Then explain the energy readings," Hammond insisted. "Our monitoring stations have detected massive gravitational distortions moving toward the Sol system," the other council members whispered among themselves. They were scared, but they didn't want to admit it. Accepting the truth would mean spending enormous amounts of money on military preparations. "We need more proof," President Brooks decided. "Until then, we will not authorize any military buildup or emergency measures." General Hammond left the meeting feeling frustrated and helpless. He knew the politicians would change their minds when it was too late. His fears proved correct 3 days later. Lieutenant Katie Walsh was working the night shift at the Pluto monitoring station when her instruments detected something impossible. Space itself was tearing open at the edge of the solar system. "Base, this is Pluto Station," Katie transmitted to Earth. "I'm reading massive spatial distortions approaching our position. Whatever's coming, it's huge." The readings on her screen showed tears in reality itself opening up like wounds. Through the gaps, Katie could see darkness that moved and writhed like living shadow. The darkness was approaching fast. "Base, I'm detecting multiple contacts emerging from the distortions. They're not ships. They're something else entirely." Katie's instruments screamed warnings as the approaching entities registered on her sensors. They were enormous, each one the size of a small moon. But they weren't solid. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. "Base, they're heading directly for the inner system. Estimated arrival at Earth in 72 hours. The transmission cut off suddenly. When Earth tried to contact Pluto Station again, there was only silence. The monitoring station, along with Katie and her entire crew, had simply vanished. Back on the Vanguard, Guardian Zeph-1's form blazed brighter as he sensed what had happened. "They have found you. The Void Singers are here." Captain Morrison felt ice in his stomach. "How many?" "I can sense at least 50 conductor entities, the large ones that command the lesser singers. Each conductor controls millions of smaller singers. Your solar system is about to be invaded by an army beyond your comprehension." Dr. Carter was frantically reading everything the Guardian had shared about Void Singer technology. "How do they move so fast?" "Our ships would take months to travel between star systems. They manipulate space and time itself," Zeph-1 explained. "The conductors can create tiers in reality that allow instant travel across vast distances. They exist partially outside normal dimensions, which is why your weapons cannot harm them." Engineer Chris Taylor, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "If normal weapons don't work, how did humanity fight them before?" The Guardian's light grew sad. "Your ancestors developed weapons that used human consciousness itself as ammunition. The technology channels emotions like courage, love, and the willingness to sacrifice for others. These are concepts the Void Singers cannot understand or defend against." "Where are these weapons?" Morrison asked. "Hidden in Guardian sites across the galaxy. But activating them requires humans with specific genetic markers, descendants of the original Guardian program. Without the right people, the weapons are useless." Dr. Carter checked her computer. "How do we find these descendants?" "Some of your crew already carry the markers," Zeph-1 revealed. "But using Guardian weapons comes with a price. The interface between human consciousness and Guardian technology changes people permanently." The ship's alarm suddenly started blaring. Ryan Torres looked up from his communications station with a pale face. "Captain, I'm receiving emergency broadcasts from Earth. The outer system monitoring stations are going dark one by one." Morrison felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. "How long do we have?" Guardian Zeph-1's form flickered like a candle in the wind. "The advanced scouts will reach Earth's orbit within days. The main fleet will arrive within weeks. If you cannot awaken the Guardian network before then, your species will join the thousands of others that have been consumed." The bridge fell silent as the crew realized they were humanity's only hope against an enemy that had already destroyed planets and was now coming for Earth itself. Dr. Lisa Carter worked without sleep for 3 days straight. Guardian Zeph-1 had given her the locations of 12 other Guardian sites within human space, but reaching them before the Void Singers would be nearly impossible. Her eyes burned as she stared at the star charts, plotting the fastest routes between systems. "The closest site is on New Geneva. she told Captain Morrison. It's only 2 days away at maximum speed. Morrison nodded. Set course immediately. How many sites can we reach before the main Singer fleet arrives? Maybe 4 or 5 if we're lucky, Lisa replied. But each Guardian we awaken will make the network stronger. The Vanguard jumped to faster than light speed and raced toward New Geneva. The colony world had been settled 50 years ago and housed about 2 million people. They had no idea what was hidden beneath their feet. When the ship arrived at New Geneva, Captain Morrison took a landing team down to the surface. Guardian Zeph-1 had given them coordinates that led to a mountain range on the planet's northern continent. The area looked completely normal, just rocks and trees. Are you sure this is the right place? Asked Engineer Chris Taylor as he scanned the area with his instruments. 100 meters down, Lisa said, checking her readings. There's a massive artificial structure directly beneath us. Chris set up drilling equipment while the rest of the team established a perimeter. It took 6 hours to drill through solid rock, but finally they broke through into a hidden chamber. When they lowered cameras into the hole, everyone gasped. The underground facility was enormous. Tunnels and chambers stretched for miles in every direction. The walls were covered with the same geometric patterns they had seen on the first Guardian crystal, but these patterns were dark and lifeless. It's like a city, whispered Ryan Torres as they descended into the facility on cables. The team's flashlights revealed incredible architecture. The chambers were perfectly carved from solid rock, with smooth floors and curved ceilings that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Strange machinery lined the walls, but it had been shut down for thousands of years. They followed the main tunnel deeper into the mountain until they reached a central chamber. In the middle of the room stood another Guardian crystal, but this one was different. It was cracked and dim, and the energy patterns inside moved sluggishly. Guardian Zeph-7, Lisa called out, remembering the naming system. We need your help. The crystal flickered weakly, and a faint form appeared, much dimmer than Zeph-1 had been. So, few remain, the Guardian whispered in a voice like wind through empty halls. Can you show us what happened here? Morrison asked. The Guardian's form stabilized slightly, and suddenly the chamber filled with images from the past. Holographic projections showed the facility as it had been during the ancient war, a massive underground city housing millions of refugees. The team watched in amazement as ghostly figures moved through the tunnels. These ancient humans looked just like modern people, but they wore advanced armor and carried weapons that glowed with internal energy. Children played in safe areas while soldiers prepared for battle above. This was one of humanity's last strongholds, Guardian Zeph-7 explained. When the Void Singers reached this system, over 3 million people took shelter here. The holographic images changed to show the final battle. Ancient human ships fought desperately in space while the Singers descended like living storms. The humans fought bravely, but they were vastly outnumbered. Did anyone survive? Lisa asked quietly. The Guardian's light dimmed further. A few thousand escaped in the final ships. They carried the genetic templates and memory cores needed to restart civilization elsewhere. Most stayed to cover the evacuation. The team saw images of the facility's final hours. Brave men and women sealed themselves in the deepest chambers, activating systems that would hide the Guardian technology from the Singers. They died protecting the future of their species. Their sacrifice was not meaningless, Zeph-7 continued. The knowledge they preserved will help you fight the returning darkness. Chris Taylor had been examining the ancient machinery while the others watched the holographic history. This technology is incredible. It's like they could manipulate matter at the atomic level. Guardian Zeph-7's attention turned to Chris. You carry the genetic markers. You can interface with Guardian systems. What does that mean? Chris asked nervously. Touch the control panel, the Guardian instructed. Chris hesitantly placed his hand on a smooth crystal surface built into the wall. The moment his skin made contact, the entire chamber blazed with light. Energy flowed up his arm and into his mind, and suddenly Chris could understand the ancient technology as if he had built it himself. I can see how it works, Chris said in amazement. The machines use crystalline matrices to amplify human consciousness. Emotions become actual energy that can manipulate physical matter. Dr. Carter was frantically taking notes. How does it work exactly? Chris kept his hand on the control panel as information flowed into his brain. Human thoughts and feelings create quantum fluctuations in space-time. The Guardian technology amplifies these fluctuations millions of times, turning them into controllable force. But there's a cost, Guardian F7 warned. The interface changes human consciousness permanently. The person becomes something between human and machine. Back on the Vanguard, test pilot Kevin Blake volunteered to be the first test subject. He was a brave man who had flown dangerous missions throughout his career. Dr. Nina Ross, the ship's physicist, prepared the experimental interface chamber they had built using Guardian blueprints. "Remember, we don't know what this will do to you," Dr. Ross warned as Kevin climbed into the chamber. "Someone has to try it," Kevin replied. "If we don't learn to use this technology, we're all dead anyway." The interface chamber was lined with crystals that had been grown using Guardian techniques. When Kevin placed his hands on the control surfaces, the crystals began to glow. Energy flowed through the chamber and into Kevin's nervous system. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then Kevin's eyes snapped open and they were glowing with the same blue light as the Guardian crystals. "Kevin, can you hear me?" Dr. Ross asked. Kevin turned to look at her and she stepped back in shock. His face was the same, but there was something different about his expression, an intelligence that seemed older and deeper than before. "I can hear everything," Kevin said in a voice that harmonized with itself. "The quantum fluctuations, the electromagnetic fields, the gravitational waves passing through space. I can feel the ship's engines, the crew's heartbeats, the solar wind from distant stars." Dr. Ross ran medical scans while Kevin described his experience. "Your brain activity has increased by 300%. Neural pathways that were never connected before are now linked. But as the hours passed, it became clear that the enhancement came with serious side effects." Kevin began experiencing memories that weren't his own. Flashes of the ancient war, glimpses of battles fought thousands of years ago. "I can see them," Kevin whispered, his glowing eyes staring at something only he could perceive. The last Guardian pilots fighting the Singers above burning worlds. They knew they were going to die, but they kept fighting to buy time for the evacuation ships. Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's xenobiologist, was studying the data Guardians F1 had shared about Void Singer biology. What she discovered was disturbing. "They weren't always like this," she told Captain Morrison. "The Void Singers were once a normal organic species just like us. But millions of years ago, they voluntarily gave up their physical forms to become pure consciousness." "Why would they do that?" Morrison asked. "They believed it was evolution," Amy explained. "They thought that physical bodies were limitations holding them back from true enlightenment. So they found a way to transfer their minds into energy patterns that could exist without matter. The implications were terrifying. If the Singers had once been like humans, it meant any species could make the same choice." "Do they still think like individuals?" "No, that's what makes them so dangerous. When they gave up their bodies, they also merged their individual minds into a collective consciousness. They became a hive mind that sees all physical beings as primitive creatures that need to be absorbed for their own good." As more Guardian sites came online across human space, a disturbing pattern emerged. Each Guardian told the same story. Humanity hadn't just lost the ancient war, they had chosen to lose it. When victory became impossible, the human empire had deliberately destroyed itself to prevent the Void Singers from spreading beyond the galaxy. Earth wasn't just a refuge, Guardians F7 revealed during one of their conversations. It was a trap. Your ancestors made your homeworld appear primitive and unimportant so the Singers would ignore it. Everything you call human civilization is actually a carefully designed cover story. The weight of this revelation hit the crew hard. Everything they thought they knew about human history was a lie designed to hide them from an enemy that consumed entire civilizations. But now the Singers had returned, and humanity's long sleep was ending. Admiral Grace Carter stood on the bridge of the battleship UES Defiance and watched the outer solar system die. Grace was Dr. Lisa Carter's older sister and had commanded Earth's defense forces for 10 years. But nothing had prepared her for this. The Void Singer scout fleets had reached Neptune's orbit 3 days ago. Where the ice giant had once floated, there was now only empty space and the dark energy signatures the Singers left behind. The enemy wasn't just destroying planets. They were erasing them from existence entirely. "Report," Grace ordered her communications officer. "All outer system monitoring stations are dark, Admiral. We've lost contact with the mining colonies on Titan and Europa. Long-range sensors show massive spatial distortions approaching Jupiter." Grace clenched her fists. The politicians on Earth had finally believed the threat was real when Neptune vanished. But by then it was almost too late. Now every human ship in the solar system was racing toward Mars for humanity's final stand. Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the communications system from the Vanguard. "Admiral, we're approaching Mars orbit with the Guardian interface equipment." "How long do we have?" 12 hours, maybe less," Grace replied. "Our long-range sensors show the main Singer fleet emerging from dark space. There are thousands of conductor entities, each one commanding millions of smaller Singers. The plan was desperate, but it was their only hope. Guardians F1 had revealed that the most powerful Guardian crystal in human space lay dormant beneath Olympus Mons on Mars, but awakening Guardian Prime would require the ultimate sacrifice. A human consciousness would have to merge permanently with the crystal. Matrix Lieutenant Colonel Dan Mitchell had volunteered for the procedure. He was a decorated soldier who had served in every major conflict of the past 20 years. More importantly, genetic testing showed he carried the strongest Guardian markers of anyone in the fleet. "Are you sure about this, Dan?" Captain Morrison asked as they prepared the interface chamber on Mars' surface. Dan looked up at the stars where dark shapes were already visible moving between the planets. "Someone has to do it, Captain. If we don't activate Guardian Prime, the Singers will get the technology and use it to spread to other galaxies." Dr. Ross and engineer Chris Taylor had spent the past week building the most advanced Guardian interface ever attempted. The chamber was carved directly into the living rock of Olympus Mons, with crystalline conduits that extended deep into the mountain where Guardian Prime waited. "Remember, once you begin the merge, there's no going back," Dr. Ross warned. "Your consciousness will become part of the Guardian network permanently." Dan nodded and stepped into the chamber. The walls were lined with crystals that pulsed with soft blue light. When he placed his hands on the control surfaces, the entire mountain began to vibrate. "Dan, can you hear me?" Morrison asked through the communication system. "I can hear you, Captain," Dan replied, but his voice was already changing, becoming deeper and more resonant. "I can feel Guardian Prime awakening. The knowledge of the ancients is flowing into my mind." The crystals in the chamber blazed brighter as Dan's consciousness merged with the vast intelligence sleeping beneath Mars. Through the interface, he could suddenly perceive Guardian sites across the entire galaxy, thousands of them, all waiting to be awakened. "My God," Dan whispered, "I can see the whole network. The ancients built Guardian sites on every world they ever colonized. We're not just activating one weapon, we're awakening an entire galactic defense system." Back in space, Admiral Grace Carter watched her sensors as Guardian sites began coming online across human space. Each activation sent out a pulse of energy that made her instruments sing with harmonious frequencies. "Admiral, I'm reading power buildups at Guardian sites on 47 different worlds," her science officer reported. "The energy patterns are linking up, forming some kind of network." Through the merged consciousness, Dan Mitchell began coordinating the Guardian awakening. His enhanced mind could process information from dozens of sites simultaneously, weaving them together into a unified defense network. But the Void Singers weren't waiting. The main enemy fleet had reached Jupiter's orbit and was systematically dismantling the gas giant. As human ships watched in horror, the massive planet was consumed piece by piece, its matter converted into energy that fed the Singer collective. "They're building something," reported Captain Julie Hayes from her ship near Jupiter. "The Singers are using Jupiter's mass to construct some kind of massive structure." Dr. Foster, monitoring the enemy from the Vanguard, identified what the Singers were creating. "It's a dimensional anchor. They're building a permanent gateway that will allow them to bring unlimited reinforcements from other galaxies." The implications were terrifying. If the Singers completed their gateway, they wouldn't just conquer Earth. They would turn the solar system into a staging area for the invasion of the entire universe. "Dan, we need those Guardian weapons online now," Admiral Carter transmitted to Mars. "Working on it," Dan replied, his voice now echoing with harmonics that hurt to hear. "But the network needs time to fully synchronize. Guardian Prime is 10,000 years old. Waking it up properly takes time." The human fleet formed a defensive line between Mars and Jupiter, knowing they were vastly outnumbered. Earth's most advanced warships looked like toys compared to the massive conductor entities approaching them. Each conductor was the size of a small moon and commanded millions of smaller Singer drones. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter," Grace broadcast to the fleet. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. If we fail here, the Singers will spread to every galaxy in the universe. Make every shot count. The first Singer scouts reached the human defensive line and the battle began. Human weapons passed harmlessly through the enemy ships, which existed partially outside normal space. But the humans had one advantage. Several ships now carried experimental Guardian interface systems. Test pilot Kevin Blake, still glowing with Guardian energy, climbed into his fighter equipped with the first Guardian weapon system. This is Guardian 1 beginning attack run. Kevin's enhanced consciousness interfaced directly with his ship's weapons, turning his emotions into destructive force. When he felt anger at the Singers for destroying Neptune, energy beams lanced out that could actually damage the partially phased enemy ships. "It's working," Kevin reported. "The Guardian weapons can hurt them." But using the Guardian interface was taking its toll. Kevin's memories continued to blur with those of ancient human pilots who had fought this same enemy thousands of years ago. Sometimes he forgot which battle he was fighting. Dr. Foster made a crucial discovery while analyzing the Singer communication patterns. "Admiral, I think some of the Singers don't want to be part of the collective anymore. I'm detecting dissent in their communications." "What do you mean?" Grace asked. "The hive mind isn't perfect. Some individual consciousness patterns are trying to break free. They remember what they were before they joined the collective, and they want their individual bodies back." This gave Admiral Carter an idea. "Can we communicate with the dissenting Singers?" "Possibly, but only through the Guardian network. The frequencies are too complex for normal communication systems." Through Guardian Prime, Dan Mitchell reached out across space with his enhanced consciousness. To his amazement, he found Singer entities that responded to his call, beings that had been forced into the collective against their will and retained memories of their original forms. "Some of them want to help us," Dan reported. "They've been trapped in the hive mind for millions of years, waiting for a chance to escape." As more Guardian sites came online, the human defense network grew stronger. Ships equipped with Guardian interfaces could now damage Singer entities, and some Singer drones began switching sides to fight against their own collective. But the main Singer fleet was approaching Earth, and their numbers seemed endless. Admiral Carter knew that even with Guardian weapons, humanity couldn't win through force alone. "Dan, is there any way to disrupt their hive mind entirely?" she asked. "There might be," Dan replied, his voice now completely transformed by the Guardian merger. "Guardian Prime has access to weapons that work on consciousness itself, but using them would mean broadcasting human emotional patterns across the entire galaxy. What would that do? It would show every conscious being in the galaxy what humanity truly is, our capacity for hope, sacrifice, and growth. It might break the Singer collective apart by reminding them of what they gave up when they abandoned individual consciousness." Admiral Carter looked at her fleet, knowing that most of these brave men and women would die in the coming battle. "Do it. Show them what it means to be human." Guardian Prime began to charge its ultimate weapon, not a device of destruction, but a beacon of pure human consciousness that would shine across the stars. The final battle began when the Void Singer main fleet reached Earth's orbit. Admiral Grace Carter watched from the bridge of the Defiance as thousands of conductor entities emerged from dark space tiers around her home planet. Each massive Singer ship cast shadows across entire continents as they descended toward the surface. "All ships engage at will," Grace ordered. "Protect Earth at all costs." The human fleet, now equipped with Guardian interface systems, met the Singers in desperate combat above the blue marble that had hidden humanity for 10,000 years. Ships blazed with the light of weaponized consciousness as human pilots channeled their emotions into destructive force. Captain Morrison guided the vanguard through a maze of Singer drones, his ship's Guardian weapons carving paths of light through the enemy formation. "Dan, how much longer until the consciousness broadcast is ready?" 2 more minutes, Dan Mitchell replied from deep within Mars. His voice now harmonized with itself in ways that barely sounded human anymore. "Guardian Prime is charging the final sequence." But the Singers weren't just attacking randomly. Dr. Foster, monitoring their patterns from the science station, realized they had a specific target. "Admiral, they're not trying to consume Earth immediately. They're heading for the Guardian sites on the surface. They want to capture the technology intact," Grace understood. "If they get their hands on Guardian Prime, they can use it to break through the barriers holding them in this galaxy." Captain Julie Hayes commanded the defense of Earth's moon, her ship dancing between Singer attack drones that moved like living shadows. "We can't hold them much longer. There are too many of them." That's when the unexpected happened. Several Singer drones suddenly turned and began attacking their own fleet. Dr. Foster's theory proved correct. Guardian. Dan's consciousness broadcasts were reaching Singer entities that wanted to escape the collective. Some of them are remembering what they used to be, Dan reported, his enhanced mind tracking the growing rebellion within the Singer ranks. The hive mind is starting to fracture. Engineer Chris Taylor, fighting his own battle against Singer infiltrators who had boarded the Vanguard, made another crucial discovery. Captain, the rebels aren't just fighting their own kind. They're sharing tactical information with us. Through the Guardian network, liberated Singer entities began providing intelligence about conductor weak points and hive mind communication frequencies. For the first time in the battle, humans gained an advantage. Test pilot Kevin Blake, his consciousness now permanently altered by Guardian interface, led a squadron of Guardian-enhanced fighters against a massive conductor entity threatening Earth's surface. "This is for Neptune, you monsters." Kevin's fighter blazed with emotional energy as he dove straight at the conductor's core. The collision between human determination and Singer hunger created an explosion of light visible from orbit. When the glare faded, the conductor was gone and Kevin's ship was drifting powerless through space. "Kevin, respond," Morrison called. "I'm alive, Captain," Kevin replied weakly, "but I think I used up everything the Guardian interface had to give." Meanwhile, the consciousness broadcast from Guardian Prime reached full power. Dan Mitchell's merged intelligence began transmitting the essence of humanity across the galaxy, not just to the Singers in Earth's system, but to every Guardian site throughout space. The transmission wasn't made of words or images, but of pure emotional resonance. It carried the feeling of a mother protecting her child, a soldier sacrificing himself for his comrades, a scientist working late into the night to cure disease. It broadcast humanity's refusal to give up hope even in the darkest circumstances. The effect on the Singer hive mind was immediate and devastating. Across the galaxy, Singer entities began experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in millions of years. They remembered what it felt like to have their own thoughts, their own dreams, their own fears. On Earth, Admiral Carter watched as entire Singer formations suddenly stopped attacking and began turning on each other. The hive mind is collapsing. They're becoming individuals again. But the most powerful conductor entity, the original Singer that had started the species transformation eons ago, fought back against the consciousness broadcast. It began drawing energy from the dimensional gateway the Singers had built from Jupiter's mass, trying to reassert control over its fracturing collective. That's the prime conductor, Dan identified through Guardian sensors. It's the original consciousness that convinced the Singers to abandon physical form. As long as it exists, it can rebuild the hive mind. Admiral Carter realized what had to be done. "All ships, concentrate fire on that gateway. We need to cut the prime conductor off from its power source." The human fleet converged on the dimensional anchor built from Jupiter's remains. Guardian weapons blazed against the alien structure, but it was heavily defended by Singer entities still loyal to the collective. Dr. Foster made a final crucial observation. "Admiral, the rebels are moving to help us. The liberated Singers are attacking the gateway from the inside." The battle for the gateway was fought in multiple dimensions as Singer rebels used their knowledge of quantum manipulation to destabilize the structure from within. Human ships provided cover fire while former enemies worked together to prevent the universe from being consumed. In the climactic moment, Guardian Prime made contact with the prime conductor itself. Dan Mitchell's enhanced consciousness, supported by the entire Guardian network, faced the ancient entity that had started the Void Singer plague. The confrontation wasn't fought with weapons, but with competing philosophies. The prime conductor projected its belief that consciousness must consume and expand to survive. Dan responded with humanity's conviction that consciousness should create and protect. "You cling to individual existence," the prime conductor communicated through dimensional distortions. "We offer evolution beyond physical limitations. You offer slavery disguised as transcendence," Dan replied, his voice now speaking for all of humanity. "True evolution means choosing your own path, not being absorbed into someone else's dream." The philosophical battle raged across multiple dimensions as two completely different views of existence clashed. But Dan had something the prime conductor had forgotten: the support of billions of individual consciousnesses, both human and recently liberated Singer. Look around you, Dan said. Your own people are choosing freedom over unity. They're remembering what it means to be themselves. The prime conductor faltered as it realized its perfect collective was crumbling. Across the galaxy, Singer entities were reclaiming individual identity and rejecting the hive mind that had controlled them for millions of years. We offer them a choice you never gave, Dan continued. They can return to individual existence or they can join a true collective, one based on cooperation instead of consumption. In the end, the prime conductor itself chose transformation. Instead of being destroyed, it accepted the possibility that consciousness could evolve without consuming others. The dimensional gateway collapsed, and the Singer threat to the universe ended not in destruction but in redemption. The aftermath was unlike anything humanity could have imagined. Across the galaxy, former Singer entities began requesting help returning to physical form. Guardian sites that had been dormant for millennia came online to assist in the greatest consciousness transfer in galactic history. Captain Morrison found himself coordinating refugee operations for beings that had once been humanity's greatest enemy. It's incredible. They remember their original forms, their home worlds, their families from millions of years ago. Admiral Carter established the new Guardian Corps, with volunteers like Kevin Blake serving as bridges between human consciousness and Guardian technology. Earth became the center of a renewed human presence in the galaxy, but one dedicated to protection rather than conquest. Dr. Foster led research teams helping former Singers adapt to physical existence again. Some of them have been pure consciousness for so long they've forgotten what it feels like to have bodies. But they're learning, and they're grateful. Dan Mitchell, now permanently merged with Guardian Prime, became the coordinator of what historians would call the Great Awakening. Through the Guardian Network, he helped establish communication between thousands of species throughout the galaxy. The network isn't just human anymore, Dan explained during one of his rare communications with his former crewmates. It's become something greater, a galaxy-wide system for protecting developing civilizations and helping consciousness evolve safely. Years later, children on Earth learned about the true history of their species while looking up at stars that now twinkled with the light of active Guardian stations. Humanity had not only survived but had become something their ancestors could never have imagined, Guardians, who ensured that the darkness between stars would never again threaten conscious life. The galaxy was no longer a place where civilizations lived in fear of consumption. Instead, it had become a garden where consciousness could grow and flourish under the protection of beings who had learned that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from helping them achieve their full potential. Captain Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, established new exploration protocols that emphasized cooperation and protection. We're not